Why, yes, we are talking about video games. Wait, why do I even have this? They can take a lot of different forms. Whether it be as an escape, a form of expression, even if that expression is
giant enemy crab,
a platform to compete against, or just a bit of fun to sink some time into.
Idiot.
And sometimes, all you want to do after a long day of getting berated in a random Discord server you just happen to be in. No, seriously, what the f even was any of that? Is sit back and relax and enjoy something simple. And you don't want any of that MMO season battle pass junk either. Just something a little bit more conventional. After the Urban Reign retrospective, and yes, this is still the copy I have because I sold my original one a long time ago, I came to realize that some of the things I enjoy most is when it's about the game itself. Maybe the mechanics are tightly wound up in a nice bubble, or the aesthetic is pleasing and complements its themes, or if the only goal that game has in mind is just about being fun. So, rather than getting melodramatic about something from my childhood, I just want to take a look at some of the titles in my recent years that I either go back to from time to time or have a newfound appreciation for. Just the kinds of chill games that you put in an album and relax to. Now, these aren't all of the games of this ilk out there, and that's gonna be relatively subjective to my personal tastes. But these could be new to some of you, and you might find something different here that you can invest some time into that otherwise would have completely flown under the radar. So, with that said, here are just a couple of my recommendations. I love it when a game just gets right to the point. Cloudberry Kingdom is nearly 10 years old now. Jeez, it makes me feel so old, remembering back to when Ubisoft used to publish good games. But despite the ambiguous name, the premise is fairly simple. Cloudberry is a procedurally generated 2D platformer, made in the vein of classic Mario merged with a roguelike. And add in a bit of Toho for good measure. Every map is different every time you play, but each goal of getting to the end is always the same. How you get there, though, could go in hundreds of ways. Basic platforms, jumper blocks, enemy bouncing over bottomless pits, phasing blocks like heckin' Mega Man, actual bullet hell precision laser shit, and sometimes the floor is lava. It gets all kinds of crazy, but there's a distinct formula to make of it that's probably the best aspect of this game. It perfectly understands the fundamentals of what makes a good arcade game. Things start off at a pretty pedestrian pace at the beginning, so it's all about stocking up on lives and getting a good combo streak of points to get through the progressively harrowing stages later on. If you've ever played games like Robotron in the past, then the formula is going to be very familiar. And when things get crazy, and they can get crazy quick, you need to be on your toes. The controls are just floaty enough to make navigation feel fluid and seamless. But even if you run into trouble, you can buy some helper items with the gems collected in each level. The AI could help guide you through a tricky part, and if all else fails, there's always slow motion. The costs can add up quick if you abuse them, but if you have a streak of perfect runs, it might be worthwhile to spend a little now so you aren't paying with your life and your multiplier later. The game pretty much does everything it reasonably can to help you, but because of its procedural nature, you might just end up staring in disbelief in how it expects you to finish some of these stages.
Is this,
The fun part of the game, right?
Every level is made to be completable in theory, but that definition can get really stressed sometimes in longer runs. It's pretty much designed to throw the book at you once it's gotten enough of your time, and the random nature of stages can make the layouts look, well, about as random as a computer could get. There is somewhat of a method to the madness though, as the solution sometimes really is to just let off the gas a bit and run right through to the end. The more strenuous patterns make this incredibly obvious late game, and that's what makes Cloudberry kind of relaxing. Yeah, it looks ridiculous at times, but there's a certain flow it gets you into that gets quickly addicting. Helping with the addictinggames.com is the aesthetic. The graphics and music are both perfectly evocative of late 2000s Newgrounds, with lots of whacked out visual motifs that switches out every couple of stages, and the techno beats helping to ease you back to a simpler time. It's the right amount of indie vibes that sells the whole thing to a very particular kind of millennial like me, who grew up with this sort of game all the time as a kid. There are other modes and playstyles beyond the basic, most of which are essentially just taking the piss on other platformers.
Oh, it's Meat Boy, but oh god, this is disorienting.
Jetpacks, cardboard jumper mode, one that's straight up ripping off a certain other indie game of the time. You can even get your Gradius on if you like. But most of these other modes are really just experimental and only supplementing the main classic style.
It's time for the one-man army. Action!
But I still love to go back to that gameplay, if only for that very particular niche of aesthetic and the simple premise that sucks me in every time I come back to this game. Cloudberry is criminally underrated, and you don't even need Uplay to play it either. What's not to like?
I just got conned into playing Flappy Bird.
Okay, maybe it can get a little nutso sometimes, and I get that's not everybody's thing. There's a lot of platformers out there, and even others using the whole procedural premise for other genres. But there's some days where platforming over lava isn't quite my cup of tea, and maybe I want something a little more puzzling and subterranean. Oh look, it's another Namco project. It's almost like it's a theme of this channel now or something. Mr. Driller was a franchise that I didn't even know existed until about a year ago. It's one of the more niche franchises of Namco's arcade catalog. Jesus, why is it so loud? But its premise has always been the same. Drilling down into catacombs of blocky caverns to get to the bottom, while having enough air to breathe in the process and avoiding getting crushed along the way. It's like a reverse Tetris, with some of the same logic even applied, when matching colors combine together to create safe passageways or disappear entirely. This one was stuck in Japan, exclusively to the GameCube no less, for nearly 20 years now, until it was localized and remastered for current-gen platforms just a year ago. So that might make this either the newest or the second oldest in this list. Oh, so this is the new Mr. Driller game. A weird genre shift, I'll say. What makes DrillLand perhaps the best in the series is that the core drilling loop is mixed up thanks to the amusement park motif. The 5 different attractions in DrillLand essentially constitutes 5 different Mr. Driller games in one package, where each of the cast gets their own micro drilling game to themselves. This might seem repetitive on paper, but the different permutations can change the way Mr. Driller is played quite a lot. From puzzle solving and treasure hunting to even as far as a full-out dungeon crawler. Something as small as having added objectives and unique obstacles to each attraction surprisingly changes a lot of how you might approach different scenarios. It's deceptively addicting stuff. If the levels are too easy for your liking, there's always an additional 3 levels of difficulty to each segment. Or if it's too hard on the other hand, you can always pick up some assist items in the shop. It does a good job of catering to both veteran and casual audiences, which is probably a good thing in hindsight because while there is an underlying storyline in DrillLand, it's short and done with in less than an hour. Thankfully, what little plot there is doesn't get in the way of the main gameplay. At worst, it's a charming reprieve from getting chumped by the same boulder 3 times. Mr. Driller has always had a thing for its striking and bubbly presentation, and especially with the modern remaster, it's at its sharpest here in this game. It's very pretty, with lots of color usage making each part of the world their own vibrant paintings in a way. And that's not even to say for the game's music. Legendary series composer and Tales of Legendia musical god,
Go Shiina,
brings out easily some of his best tracks here, in much the same style as his RPG work. And while that might sound weird on the surface for those who are familiar with the man's style, the boastful orchestras in a digging tower is beautiful enough to bring a man to tears. Themes even change with the difficulty, or depending on the scenario. And the laid-back, swinging violins for the main hub is just wondrous enough that the whole real world behind you practically melts into the past, immersing you in a game that's just so easy to digest, but so diverse in gameplay that it's hard to hate it. This mofo even has local and online multiplayer, as if it needed any more motivation to play it with a friend. DrillLand is exciting, relaxing, and just plain fun to go back and play when I'm in the mood for a puzzle fix. And the $30 or so it costs on Steam, I'd say the soundtrack is worthy of that price alone. And casual games like Mr. Driller can be a lot of fun, but sometimes I'm looking for a game that's a bit more kinetic. And for that particular itch, there's really no better title than my next pick. The Unreal franchise is somewhat of a lost art these days. It used to hit it big with its debut title, Unreal, and also spawned the ever-popular, if not slightly overused, Unreal Engine. But the entry that I have the most fondness for is the 1999 Unreal Tournament. Yes, in case you're wondering, we are in fact talking about relaxing games here. But there's a very particular charm to everything about UT that makes it stand out. Its graphics and presentation come from the ripe age of PC gaming, where companies were just starting to implement advanced graphical features like colored lights, water,
lens flare, and motion blurs,
while simultaneously evoking the geographical simplicity that defined games from the N64 and PlayStation era. All of that is a really fluffy way of saying UT is charmingly dated, with its flat squared-off platforms and hard edges being evocative of a simpler time, while still having the ability to look extremely sharp with the right set of textures. It's my kind of perfectly retro, which you might call aged, but I'd say it's appropriate for a game that's all about frantic shooting. What makes Unreal Tournament great, in combination with its 90s stylized look, is the gameplay. There's a particular brand of high-intensity zen that UT captures, which I don't think any modern FPS has gotten a handle of since, because it melts together simple controls, smooth movement, and a weapon sandbox that lends itself perfectly to dynamic microcosms in every match that's played. Each weapon has a purpose that is easily identified just from their looks, having their own distinct advantages and ways to maneuver around with your own kit. Maps are spacious enough to have several paths, but all eventually converge for those deliciously low-poly bloodbaths. And death is hardly a problem, since you jump right back into the action in less than a second. It's one of the few FPS games that performs the miraculous act of keeping a frenetic pace even through longer score goals, because there's no real pace killer here like there tends to be in many modern shooters these days.
It kind of upsets me.
UT is all about dopamine. Getting consecutive kills and hearing the announcer chant about it with every subsequent headshot in glorious fashion.
Headshot, dead. Multi-kill. Ultra kill. Monster kill.
CTF Phase 2 against UT's impressively immersive bots is a true testament to how gracefully it's aged. The spacey background with the trippy rotating skybox, the simple two-lane map design and opposing towers of snipers, the back-and-forth tugs of war of controlling points, and the brief moments of excitement or sheer horror when you hear the blip of a captured flag. All underpinned by the dreamlike music that plays, which words can't even speak for how perfectly these pieces contrast the sheer carnage on screen. This was one of the first examples of tracker music I've heard, and the compositions paired with the choice of software instruments is simply timeless. I never get sick of hearing this game's original soundtrack. I don't think any other game, either in this series or in the genre, has really captured the specific vibes that UT99 does. It's kinetic, it's frenetic, it's aesthetic, and it's fantastic. Even if you've been burnt out on the modern shooter for the past 5 or so years, you owe it to yourself to experience Unreal Tournament at least once. In a few words, it's the best rehab FPS. in my opinion anyways. And also, in case anyone in particular is listening, Tim Epic, I know this is your franchise. You're free to finish it whenever you want. It's supposed to be a community-oriented project, so why aren't you finishing it at any point? You can finish it at any time, you know. Once that Fortnite train has run its course, we could really use more games like this again. Yeah, thank you. But it is visually noisy, and the sound mixing can be horrendously unbalanced at times, which can get exhausting after a few rounds. So, once I'm done having my fill of late 90s jibs, I like to wind down a bit with just a small taste of the last game on offer tonight. N++. The added pluses indicating this being the third iteration of a fairly long-running series of platformers. Originally made on Flash, believe it or not, the original N was one of those browser games I'd played in the school computer labs somewhere in the late 2000s. It was then re-released with new levels on the Nintendo DS, and then upgraded to slick widescreen HD with the 360 Live Arcade version, and then finally, in 2015, N++, and double plus, god damn it, came out for pretty much everything from the PlayStation 4 onwards. From its inception,
What the f is that?
N is a physics-based single-screen platformer, where the entire level is confined in a what you see is what you get fashion. Chapters are grouped into chunks of 5 stages, with the simple goal of getting to the exit before the timer runs out. The simplicity of N is immediately apparent with its one-button gameplay, since all you can do is jump. But you can do so much with just that one jump. Getting over obstacles, climbing up walls, running up inclines or downhill to catch massive air or run inhumanly fast, making tight jumps off corners for extra height. There's more physics in this series than a modern Sonic game, and you can feel that with nearly every interaction relying on a heavy but intuitive weight model that influences how jumps work, as well as the many ways that you can die here. N is fun because it knows how simple its design is, so all the levels are about wringing out as much of the core systems as it can reasonably achieve. And how well did they do? Well, I actually forgot to write how many there is. Fuck it, let me do some quick math. With the 125 levels of training stages, the 1000 levels of throwback stages, and the 500 levels unique to this version, there is 1,625 levels of diverse, fun, and ball-sweatingly tight challenges to overcome in total just for the single-player component alone. And that's just the level packs it comes with. Add in the level creator and an entire community of custom stages, and it literally is an N+++ amount of content you could sink your teeth into for maybe a couple of years. Add to that the slick and simple presentation with additional color themes and the soundtrack of lo-fi trance beats that hums along in the background as you play, and N++ creates a miraculously relaxing yet rewarding experience to zoom through that not many other platformers try to pull off. There really isn't a game like N, and I think it deserves more love. And I really do mean it. All of these games are incredibly soothing experiences. Whether it's a genre-shifting puzzler, an old-fashioned FPS, or platformers with infinitum levels of content, these are all well worth your time and, most importantly, very affordable and accessible.
Doom it!
And in particular is one that stands out the most though, simply because it's available on nearly everything. On PlayStation 4 and 5 by extension, on the Nintendo Switch, and on Steam for Windows, Mac, and Linux platforms. Wait, Linux? I thought you couldn't even play anything on Linux.
A Linux gaming PC requires all of that crap and then another mountain of crap on top of it.
So what have I been playing on this whole time?
It is not that easy.
Are you telling me this entire time that I've been playing on something that isn't Windows?